we have Gemina Labs on deck with CEO Brian FIRTH. He was previously at Swiss Precision. He helped orchestrate a $1.3 billion deal with Johnson & Johnson when he was with Inverness Medical, and he is with us today. Please bring on Brian. I believe he's in the studio, and there he is.
Good morning, Tony.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks very much. Yes, thanks for having me along.
I hope I got all of your details right in that brief intro.
Yeah, right enough.
Well, there's a lot of background on you. You have quite a resume.
Yeah.
Anything that I missed that should be in there?
No, I mean, you covered it. I mean, basically, I've been in medical diagnostics, I think, for about 37 years. Although I'm an engineer by background, I started with things like NMR scanning machines, or making the magnets for NMR scanning machines. So I've done everything from big machines right through to very small point of care and everything in between, you know, everything from drugs of abuse testing to cardiology to you name it.
Okay. Well, so how did you find your way to Gemina Labs? And talk to us a little bit about the company and how it differentiates itself from other companies in this space.
Sure, yeah. So I've been in diagnostics for like 37 odd years. I have been really fortunate to be able to be involved in some of the really fundamental changes, whether it be 700 megahertz, 900 megahertz magnets that are inside NMR scanning machines, through to home testing for diabetes, the first tests that, you know, for diabetes, the first pregnancy tests, home pregnancy tests. So I've been involved in a lot of firsts, and I've been really fortunate for that. So I've been CEO for Swiss Precision Diagnostics, which owned Clearblue. I retired, essentially, was off to go sailing, and I got a call from an old colleague who said, look, there's a small Canadian company who have a really interesting stuff that they're doing with an interesting technology. They need somebody to look at their clinical strategy. Would you have a look at it? So I looked at it and rang back and said, you know what they're sitting on? He said, yeah. And I should point out at this point, this colleague was one of the people who's named on the original lateral flow patent. And between us, we concluded that they were sitting on the biggest invention since lateral flow itself was invented. So I couldn't really resist getting involved, and the chairman at the time then asked if I would come in as CEO, and the rest is history.
So you were so intrigued that you put off retirement to come back.
Yeah, I'm not very good at retirement.
That's something. Okay, yeah. So talk to us a little bit about the technology.
Yeah, so
yeah, go ahead.
Go on. Sorry, Tony. You can.
Well, I know that it improves on an existing lateral flow test, and what makes these improvements so significant? I really want to make sure our listeners get a hint of that.
Yeah, sure. So the way you would really, so we're a diagnostics technologies company. We make chemistries that improve diagnostics. We started with lateral flow, but we're now looking at molecular, and at some point we'll come back to diabetes and electrochemistry. But the way you would describe what we do, if the diagnostic was the car, we're the turbocharger. So we don't make the car, we make the turbocharger. So we increase performance. And the way we do that is very simple. We, at one end, in fact, our CTO would describe it as what we make is clever glue. We stick things together that shouldn't stick together. So if I use lateral flow as an example, when you make a lateral flow test, you spray antibodies on a line. And those antibodies catch your target, the antigen you're looking for, that's attached to a little gold bead. And what you want is your antibodies standing in a very straight line, a bit like netball players all standing with their hands up in the air waiting to catch the ball. In reality, that doesn't happen. What happens is when you spray the antibody down onto nice cellulose, some of the antibody is standing upright, some of it's lying on its side, some of it's upside down. So it's sort of almost like drunk netball players rather than you know professional netball players. And as a result, and there's lots of studies on this over the years, only about 15 to 25% of your antibody is actually effective. And that's really the root of the sensitivity problem for lateral flow tests. What Gemina chemistry does is it basically, you spray it down and it grabs hold of the antibody and flips them all up the right way. So they're all standing upright with our hands in the air. So 100% of your antibody is effective. So the bottom line, what we do is we make something that's like it's in three parts. There's a top, middle, and a bottom. The top grabs hold of the antibody, and the bottom grabs hold of your surface. So what we're able to do is tune the top to attach to anything, antibodies, bacteria, DNA, RNA, doesn't matter. And we can tune the bottom to stick to any material. So whether it be nitrocellulose, cellulose, graphene, glass, polymers, etc. So that's essentially what's the root of what we do.
Now you, Gemina really recently signed a deal with a global diagnostics company. Talk to us a little bit about that transaction.
Yeah, I can't actually mention who it is because actually the root of it is what we're doing with them is so significant for them. But basically, they're looking to improve the performance of their test. So they're using our chemistry. We'd be looking to use our chemistry inside their test to improve its performance, right? So that deal we signed in January. We've got another 4 in the pipeline now. In fact, we sent out our first revenue check or invoice last week and received the cash in this week. So that's a major step forward for us. We've actually started sending out invoices.
Okay. Well, if you're ready and able to break the news, remember benzinga.com.
Yeah.
I would love to tell that story when you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
Give us a picture of the size of the diagnostics market and what the opportunities are there for investors.
Okay, so the IVD market, which is diagnostics as a whole, is worth about $100 billion a year, depending who you speak to. The point of care diagnostics, and the point of care diagnostics, the market that we make the biggest difference to, right? Point of care market is those diagnostics that take place at the patient, where you take the sample, run the diagnostic, and give them back the result without ever leaving their site, right? So home pregnancy tests, COVID tests are a point of care test. Anything the doctor can take with them and administer as point of care test. And the point of care testing market is about 43 billion. It splits into 3 big components. About 11 billion is lateral flow tests. About 9 billion is molecular testing, both of which we heard a lot about during COVID. The rest, and the biggest proportion, 23 billion, is actually electrochemistry and really is sort of the diabetes self-testing market, which now is huge, by far the biggest part. Between molecular and lateral flow, our addressable market that we can actually get hold of is worth about $3.6 billion. So that's what we're going after at the moment, is about $3.6 billion.
And what are some of the milestones that Gemina is looking forward to in the second half of the year and possibly into 2025?
Yeah, so if we go into 2025, I think this year we start seeing we start generating revenue. Our revenue generation by the end of the year will be relatively modest, somewhere around $250,000, maybe even $500,000 dollars. Next year, though, that will be significant. That will grow up to nearly $4 million, $3.7 million, something like that, dollars, and then even more the following year. So they're the big ones from a revenue side. And from a capacity point of view, we'll be bringing on our new protein production plant later this year. In fact, towards the sort of second half of this year, that plant will come online. From a technology point of view, you're going to see us making announcements more about, we're looking at detecting TB in saliva and, being able to enable that. Various other sample types where our chemistry works. We're doing work in saliva, we're doing work in nasal swabs, we're doing work in urines, we're doing works in blood. But you're likely to see some other things as well, and we'll be announcing those as we go through the year. So there'll be a series of technology developments as we expand our licensable base and deepen what we license it into, in terms of both sample and sort of target. On the technology side. So there'll be stuff happening on technology, stuff happening with capacity and manufacturing, and stuff happening with revenues. So, yeah, it's a busy year.
With your deep background and all the major companies you've worked for, what were some of the big lessons that you learned and took with you to Gemina? I mean, it seems like Gemina is really lucky to have you, considering all the companies that you've worked for, and you were so passionate about it that you came out of retirement to work with this company. talk to us about some of the major lessons and what you're bringing to the company. Why having you at the helm it was so important for them?
Right. So I think there's a couple of things in there, maybe 2 or 3 things that are really key. One, it's very easy for small diagnostic companies or technology companies that are in developing diagnostics to get caught up in the diagnostic itself. I mean, the world is full of one-hit wonders, right? Guys have got one test, they're making 10 million of them a year, they're hardly making any money at all, and they're never going to go anywhere else if you're not careful. So one of the things was really taking out of this, what is the base technology that could really go everywhere? Your biggest market is if you can sell to every diagnostic company in the world, right? If you could be the Intel inside of diagnostics, that's where you want to be. Secondly, that puts you in that sort of high margin reagents business, high margin, high recurring revenues. It's much easier to manage the growth there. I mean, I was describing earlier on today, somebody saying, look, if you wanted to be a small diagnostic company and launch a diagnostic product, you would never get to, by the end of year 2, 100 million tests a year going out across Europe. You just would never have the distribution to do that. All the biggest diagnostic players already have that distribution. They're already, and people in some of the industries, will do parallel launches in 57 countries at once. I've never come across a small company that can do that, because it costs $9 million just to do the launch. So that's the first thing. Really understanding what is it that is your unique proposition that you can monetize, right? And the fact that it goes in a diagnostic is not quite immaterial, but almost immaterial. Right, that's the first thing. The second thing is you can never underestimate how much capacity you're going to need. I mean, I spent a lot of time in diabetes and we could not keep up. Right? There's some very famous pictures of the factory being developed in Inverness in Scotland, where you've got, a fully operating line, next line being commissioned, next line being installed, next building being, next part of the building being commissioned, steel frame behind that, foundations behind that, growing like a big long snail, because you just couldn't keep up with the demand. You've got something that really goes. So one of the things we've been looking at is the way we operate is we're a bit like Coca-Cola. Although we license out the technology, we sell the syrup that is the Coca-Cola syrup. Really, that's how we make. So we keep control of our IP by selling the syrup, and then the license goes on top. So we have to make the syrup. You can't underestimate, how fast you're going to need capacity. Already our original models, one license deal, one major license deal a year, maybe raising to 2, etc. And already we've got 4 in the pipeline. So, that's kind of the big thing. Don't underestimate what you're going to need in production capacity is for something like this. Only 2 big things.
I'm curious because, the Coca-Cola comparison is very interesting, but Coca-Cola owns the syrup.
Yeah.
And now if Gemina Labs all goes well in the next few years, is there potential for M&A? I mean, you have M&A expertise. You've been in that situation before. Could a larger player say, hey, Gemina is the target that we need. We want them on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that could easily be an outcome. There's two possible outcomes. Either we become as big as one of the big players, or one of the big players takes us out, and decides they want us inside. I mean, that's almost inevitable. I mean, there are some very big diagnostic companies that we might be significant to, but there's also big players in the industry that are very like us, but just much, much bigger. So, it's all possible. The thing that we have is something that's quite unique with the patents around our dual affinity binders. So we're in quite an interesting position.
Okay, so with Lance, our last guest, I capped off the interview with one question, which I always like to ask guests whenever I'm conducting a webinar or doing a fireside chat like this, whether it's virtual or in person. I always want to know, I want to get in the mind of a CEO and what stresses them out. What keeps you up at night, and how do you deal with that stress?
If my wife was listening to this, and I kind of hope she's not, by this time she'd be pulling her hair and going, oh God, here he goes, because she always complains that my superpower is my ability to go to sleep.
That is a good superpower.
Yeah, so I can go, if I lie flat, I can be sleeping in 15 seconds, if I want to. But I mean, I don't sleep a lot, but when I go to the bed, I can sleep regardless of what's going on. And I think that's probably, if anything, my superpower is being able to sleep regardless of what's going on around about me, and just shut it off, get to sleep, get recharged, and then start again. But I think if what you really say, right, what is it that CEOs like myself are sort of continuously worrying about? Unfair to say we continuously worry about it, but the big considerations we have to, one, have we got the capital strategy right to meet what we're trying to do? Are we building the right kind of capacities, both in production, both in R&D, both in business development? So are we human capacities? Are we building human and physical capacities that are appropriate for what we're trying to do? And is our strategy long term? Are we making ourselves a long term game, or are we making ourselves too easy to acquire too early? So yeah, that would be probably for me.
But it's all, at the end of the day, you got it handled. There's no challenge that you find, even on the macro level, hard to tackle.
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, there are some really tricky challenges, but no challenge is difficult when you've got the right team round about you. And I'm very lucky that what we've got in Gemina is, an R&D team that seem to be able to, turn stuff around, and they're incredibly creative.
Sounds like
we've got a capital markets team that's really beginning to step up to where our next phase is. So yeah, I'm actually really lucky.
Let's talk about the talent bench. Is Gemina hiring?
We're always looking for people. We will continue to look at people, because it's one thing, contracts increasing, manufacturing capacity increasing, but we've got to keep up with that with, people in all sorts of key areas. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Brian. This was a great chat. I really hope to continue our coverage of Gemina Labs, especially in the next couple of weeks. I want to cover that deal.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Great to speak to you, Tony.